Here's a comparative analysis of Deng's love for Insaf and Suzy, based on the novel The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Deng's love for Insaf. Depth and origin. Deng's love for Insaf is portrayed as his first and deepest romantic attachment. Their relationship begins in their teenage years, rooted in genuine affection and mutual admiration, despite the severe social and racial barriers between them. Deng is persistent and idealistic, believing that love can overcome the entrenched racism and family opposition that define their world. Sacrifice and suffering. Deng's love for Insaf is marked by sacrifice. He risks his reputation, safety, and ultimately his family ties to defend her when she is accused of multiple crimes. He sells his car, drops out of medical school, and is even disowned by his parents for refusing to abandon Insaf during her trial. Deng's willingness to endure public humiliation, physical pain, including flogging and disability, and exile for Insaf's sake demonstrates the intensity and selflessness of his love. Nature of attachment. Deng's love for Insaf is passionate, loyal, and enduring. Even after being separated by law, family, and geography, his feelings do not waver. He sees Insaf as his soulmate, and their love is depicted as transformative, challenging social norms and ultimately leading both to a new life in exile. Deng's love for Suzy. Context and motivation. Suzy is Deng's fiancée after his separation from Insaf. Their relationship is arranged and socially acceptable, as both are from the Dinka tribe and share similar backgrounds. Deng's relationship with Suzy is, at first, comfortable and promising. They share interests, spend time together, and plan a future that aligns with family and societal expectations. Comparison to Insaf. Deng's feelings for Suzy are sincere, but not as intense or consuming as his love for Insaf. He admits to himself that his attachment to Suzy is more a product of circumstance and parental approval than of deep passion. When faced with the choice between defending Insaf or maintaining his engagement to Suzy, Deng chooses Insaf, even at the cost of losing Suzy and his family support. Nature of attachment. Deng's love for Suzy is respectful and affectionate, but it lacks the sense of destiny and sacrifice that characterizes his relationship with Insaf. Suzy represents stability and acceptance, but not the transformative, boundary-breaking love that Insaf embodies for Deng. Summary table. Aspect: Deng and Insaf. Deng and Suzy. Origin: teenage romance, forbidden, passionate arranged, socially approved. Sacrifice: extreme, risks life, family, future minimal, ends engagement for Insaf. Intensity: deep, enduring, transformative, sincere, but less intense. Conflict: racial, social, legal, familial, cultural alignment, no major conflict. Outcome: endure suffering, exile, reunion, ends engagement, Suzy moves on. Conclusion. Deng's love for Insaf is the central, defining relationship of his life, marked by passion, sacrifice, and a willingness to challenge all odds. His love for Suzy, while genuine, is ultimately overshadowed by his enduring devotion to Insaf. The novel uses these contrasting relationships to explore themes of love, identity, and the cost of defying societal boundaries. Would you like a deeper analysis of a particular scene, or a focus on how Suzy herself responds to Deng's divided loyalties? Deng's parents reject Insaf and accept Suzy for several intertwined reasons, all rooted in social, cultural, and personal factors. 1. Racial and ethnic prejudice. Insaf is an Arab girl from northern Sudan, while Deng and his family are Dinka from South Sudan. Deng's parents are acutely aware of the deep-seated racism and social stigma attached to relationships between northern Arabs and southern Africans in Sudanese society. They know that Insaf's Arab family and community view Deng as a black Negro slave and fear that their son will never be fully accepted or respected in her world. By contrast, Suzy is from the same Dinka tribe as Deng, making her an ethnically and culturally appropriate match in the eyes of both families and the wider community. 2. Religious and social compatibility. Suzy and Deng share similar religious and cultural backgrounds. Their families have similar traditions, expectations, and values, making the relationship socially smooth and free from the kind of conflict that marks Deng's relationship with Insaf. Insaf's relationship with Deng is seen as a violation of both religious and social norms, especially since Islamic law and Sudanese custom give the father the right to choose his daughter's husband. 3. Fear of scandal and social repercussions. Insaf's relationship with Deng is surrounded by scandal, rumors, and accusations, adultery, pregnancy, murder, etc., which bring shame and risk to both families. Deng's parents fear being ostracized or targeted by their own community for supporting a relationship that is widely condemned and seen as abominable. Susie, on the other hand, represents a safe, respectable, and scandal-free choice. 4. Parental authority and control. Deng's parents want to maintain their authority and ensure their son's marriage strengthens family ties and social standing. Accepting Susie as a daughter-in-law reinforces their role as decision-makers and upholders of tradition. Supporting Deng's love for Insaf would mean defying not only their own values, but also the expectations of their extended family and community. 5. Practical considerations. Susie is seen as a stable, reliable, and proper partner who will not bring trouble or conflict into the family. Insaf's life is marked by trauma, legal troubles, and ongoing danger, making her a risky and uncertain choice for a daughter-in-law. Summary table. Factor Insaf, rejected, Susie, accepted. Ethnicity Arab, outsider, stigmatized, Dinka, same tribe, accepted. Religion/culture different, source of conflict same, source of harmony. Social status scandal, rumors, legal trouble respectable, stable, scandal-free. Parental control undermines authority, reinforces authority. Family reputation threatened by union, enhanced by union. In the novel, Deng's parents' rejection of Insaf is not just personal prejudice, it is a reflection of the broader social, racial, and religious divisions in Sudanese society. Their acceptance of Susie is a choice for safety, tradition, and social approval, while their rejection of Insaf is a defense against scandal, shame, and the unknown. Drawing from Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, the cultural differences between Deng's family, South Sudanese Dinka, with both Muslim and Christian roots, and Insaf's family, Northern Sudanese Arab Muslims, are central to the novel's conflict and are depicted in rich, sometimes painful detail. Here's a detailed explanation. 1. Ethnic and racial identity. Deng's family, Dinka, South Sudanese. African identity. The Dinka are a Nilotic ethnic group from South Sudan, with distinct physical features, language, and customs. Historical context. Dinka and other southern groups have long been marginalized and even enslaved by northern Arab Sudanese, leading to deep-seated mistrust and prejudice. Racial prejudice. In the novel, Deng is repeatedly called a black Negro slave by Insaf's family and community. The term Jingo is used pejoratively for Africans, reflecting a social hierarchy that places Arabs above Africans. Insaf's family, Arab, Northern Sudanese. Arab identity. Insaf's family is proud of their Arab lineage, tracing ancestry to the Prophet's uncle, and see themselves as pure and superior. Colorism and racism. There is a strong taboo against Arab girls marrying African boys. Insaf's father would rather marry her to a dog or a pig than to an African Negro boy. Social status. Arabness is associated with nobility, purity, and social privilege, while African identity is stigmatized. 2. Religion and religious law. Deng's family. Religious diversity. Deng's father is Muslim, his mother is Christian. Deng is exposed to both faiths, attends madrasa and church, and is ultimately raised Muslim. Religious flexibility. While there is tension, there is also a history of interfaith marriage and some degree of tolerance within the family. Insaf's family. Strict Islam. Insaf's family is deeply religious, with her father being a respected and feared figure in the mosque. Patriarchal authority. Islamic law is invoked to justify the father's right to choose his daughter's husband and to punish her for disobedience. Sharia and honor. The family's honor is tied to the daughter's chastity and obedience. Any perceived transgression is met with severe punishment, including house arrest, forced circumcision, and threats of honor killing. 3. Marriage customs and gender roles. Deng's family. Arranged marriage is common, but love matches are possible, as seen in Deng's parents' own story. Women have some agency. Deng's mother is educated and works as a teacher. Intertribal marriage is accepted within the Dinka and other southern groups, but marrying outside, especially to an Arab, is rare and controversial. Insaf's family. Arranged marriage is the norm. The father has absolute authority over his daughter's marital fate. Virginity and family honor. The family goes to extreme lengths to prove Insaf's virginity, including invasive and unscientific tests. Polygamy and age gaps. It is acceptable for a teenage girl to be married off to a much older man, as with Insaf and Haj Taha. Female genital mutilation, practiced as a means of controlling female sexuality and ensuring purity. 4. Community and social surveillance. In both cultures, community opinion is powerful, but in the Arab context, it is especially oppressive. Gossip, rumor, and collective judgment play a huge role in Insaf's downfall. Her entire neighborhood participates in policing her behavior and spreading scandal. Honor and shame. Insaf's family is willing to go to any length to avoid shame, including violence against their own daughter. 5. Law and justice. In the North, Arab, Muslim Sharia law dominates, with severe punishments for perceived sexual transgressions and legal discrimination against Africans and women. In the South African, mixed faith, there is more legal pluralism and less rigid enforcement of Sharia, especially after South Sudan's independence. 6. Attitudes toward love and individual choice. Deng's family, while not supportive of his love for Insaf, is motivated by fear for his safety and social standing, rather than pure hatred. Insaf's family sees her love as a disease, a threat to the family's honor, and a violation of religious and racial boundaries. Individual happiness is always secondary to family, tribe, and community reputation. Key examples from the novel. Insaf's father's reaction. My Arab father might marry me off to a dog or a pig, but not to an African Negro boy. Deng's parents' warning. Her Arab family despised you and separated her from you by force, because you're a black Southern African and she is a white Northern Arab. That is why they look at you as just an inferior Negro slave who is not suitable to be a life partner for her. Sharia court's annulment. The marriage is dissolved not for lack of love or legal irregularity, but because of inadequacy between the tribe of the wife and the tribe of the husband. Community surveillance. Talkative and noisy women and gossip mongers had presented many arguments and evidence to support this conspiracy theory. Summary table. Aspect: Deng's family, Dinka, South Sudan. Insaf's family, Arab, North Sudan. Ethnicity: African, Dinka, historically marginalized Arab, pure, privileged. Religion: Muslim father, Christian mother, tolerant strict Sunni Islam, Sharia law. Marriage: arranged, but some agency arranged, patriarchal, no agency for girls. Gender roles: women can work, some flexibility, women controlled, FGM, honor-based violence. Community: less surveillance, more diversity, intense surveillance, gossip, honor culture. Law: mix of secular and religious Sharia law, severe punishments. Attitude to love possible, but risky, love outside tribe/religion forbidden. Conclusion. The novel uses Deng and Insaf's doomed romance to expose the deep cultural rifts between North and South Sudan, Arab and African, Muslim and Christian, patriarchal and more flexible gender systems. These differences are not just abstract, they are lived, enforced, and policed by families, communities, and the state, with devastating consequences for those who dare to cross the boundaries. If you'd like, I could provide direct quotes from the text or focus on a specific cultural practice, like marriage, FGM, or honor killings, in more detail. Of religious influences in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, as depicted in the novel's characters, plot, and cultural context. 1. Islamic law, Sharia, and social control. Patriarchal authority. Insaf's family is governed by strict Sunni Islam, where the father is the ultimate authority. Islamic law gives him the right to choose his daughter's husband, and his decisions are seen as divinely sanctioned. Marriage and guardianship. The novel repeatedly references the Islamic requirement that a virgin girl cannot marry without her father's consent. The Sharia court later annuls Insaf and Deng's marriage on the grounds that her Arab father did not approve, despite their mutual love and legal ceremony. Punishments and honor. Sharia law is invoked to justify severe punishments for perceived sexual transgressions, house arrest, forced circumcision, public shaming, and even threats of honor killing. The court sentences Insaf to death for murder, and Deng is flogged for adultery after their marriage is annulled. Community surveillance. The mosque and religious leaders play a central role in policing morality. The community's sense of honor is deeply tied to religious law, and gossip or rumor can lead to real legal and physical consequences. 2. Religious identity and division. Muslim versus Christian. Deng's family is mixed. His father is Muslim. His mother is Christian. This creates tension in his upbringing, as both parents try to pull him toward their faith. Ultimately, he is raised Muslim, but the family's history of interfaith marriage is a source of both strength and vulnerability. Religious conversion and apostasy. Insaf's later conversion to Christianity, after her ordeal in India and the UK, is depicted as a profound act of personal liberation, but it also places her in mortal danger. Apostasy from Islam is a capital crime in Sudan, and she faces threats of execution if returned. Religious exclusivity. Both Muslim and Christian communities in the novel are shown to be exclusive and, at times, intolerant. For example, Christian families and churches in Sudan are suspicious of Insaf, and her relationship with William, a Christian, is forbidden by both faiths. 3. Religious rituals and daily life. Islamic practices, daily prayers, fasting during Ramadan, and Quranic recitation are woven into the fabric of Insaf's family life. Religious rituals are not just spiritual, but are used to reinforce social order and gender roles. Christian practices. When Insaf is sheltered by Indian Christians in Bombay, she observes their prayers, church attendance, and communal meals. The contrast between the warmth and acceptance she finds in the Indian Christian family and the harshness of her Muslim upbringing is a major theme. Religious festivals and customs. Weddings, funerals, and other life events are marked by religious ceremonies, which also serve as moments of social control and reinforcement of community boundaries. 4. Religious law versus secular law. Sharia versus civil law. The novel highlights the tension between religious and secular legal systems. In Sudan, Sharia law overrides civil law, especially in matters of marriage, sexuality, and family. In India and the UK, secular law provides some protection, but religious influence still shapes community attitudes and legal outcomes. International refugee law. Insaf's quest for asylum in India and the UK brings her into contact with international legal norms that conflict with Sudanese religious law. Her eventual acceptance as a refugee in the UK is portrayed as a triumph of secular, humanitarian values over religious persecution. 5. Religious justification for discrimination. Racial and gender hierarchies. Religious texts and traditions are used to justify racial discrimination, Arabs over Africans, and gender oppression, male authority over women. The Sharia court's annulment of Insaf and Deng's marriage is based on the inadequacy of their tribes, despite both being Muslims. Polygamy and FGM. Practices like polygamy and female genital mutilation are justified by religious leaders as being in accordance with the Quran and Sunnah, even when they cause immense suffering. 6. Religious hypocrisy and reform. Hypocrisy. The novel is critical of religious leaders who use faith to justify their own power and prejudice. Both Muslim and Christian leaders are shown to be capable of manipulation, exclusion, and even violence in the name of religion. Possibility of reform. Through characters like the Indian Christian family and the feminist lawyer Siham Khalil, the novel suggests that true religious values, compassion, justice, and love can transcend dogma and tradition. Key examples from the novel. Sharia court annulment. We, the three members of this blessed court of Allah and His Messenger, announce from today onwards the annulment of the marriage contract between Deng Majak Nasser and Insaf, the daughter of Hajj Salah al-Junaid, based on the law of inadequacy or insufficiency between the tribe of the husband and the tribe of the wife. Honor and punishment. If my free Arab daughter had committed that shame, I would have opened her womb with this agricultural knife and taken out of her womb the bastard child and smashed his head against the wall. Apostasy and threats. We must return her to Sudan as quickly as possible. When she arrives there, she must be tried before the Sharia court, convicted, and hanged to death for her apostasy from Islam and turning into an impure, infidel Christian woman. Summary table. Religious influence manifestation in the novel. Sharia law marriage annulment, flogging, death penalty, honor killings. Patriarchal authority father's control over daughter's fate. Community surveillance gossip, rumor, religious policing. Interfaith tension Muslim-Christian marriage, conversion, suspicion, and exclusion. Rituals and customs prayers, fasting, weddings, funerals, FGM, polygamy. Secular versus religious refugee law, asylum, international versus Sudanese law. Hypocrisy and reform critique of religious leaders, hope for compassion and justice. In summary, religion in The Abominable Love is both a source of identity and a tool of control, shaping every aspect of the characters' lives, from love and marriage to law, gender, and race. The novel is a powerful critique of how religious doctrine, when fused with social prejudice, can become a force for oppression, but also hints at the possibility of a more compassionate, inclusive faith. The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. The consequences of apostasy, leaving Islam, especially for Christianity, are depicted as extremely severe, both legally and socially. Here's a detailed analysis based on the novel's content. 1. Legal consequences of apostasy. Capital punishment. In Sudan, as depicted in the novel, apostasy from Islam is a capital crime. The Sharia law, which is enforced in Sudan, prescribes the death penalty for anyone who leaves Islam. The Prophet Muhammad's hadith is cited, whoever changes his religion, kill him. Extradition threats. When Insaf seeks asylum in India and later in the UK, the Sudanese embassies in both countries actively pursue her extradition, not just for alleged criminal charges, but specifically because she has left Islam and converted to Christianity. The embassy's legal advisors emphasize that apostasy is a crime punishable by death in Sudan. No refuge in international law initially. Insaf's application for refugee status is rejected in India because the UN office is misled by the Sudanese embassy, which frames her as a criminal rather than a religious refugee. Only after intervention and proof of her presidential pardon does she gain protection in the UK. 2. Social consequences. Total social ostracism. Apostasy is seen as a betrayal not only of religion but of family, tribe, and nation. Insaf is disowned by her family, and her father and community consider her dead to them. Incitement to violence. Religious leaders and student groups in the diaspora, e.g., Sudanese students in India, issue fatwas and public threats against Insaf, calling for her death as an apostate. The leader of Ansar al-Sunnah al-Mohammadiyya publicly declares that she should be killed for wearing a cross and converting to Christianity. Loss of all support networks. Insaf is abandoned by her family, former friends, and even many in the Sudanese diaspora. She is only protected by non-Muslim allies, the Indian Christian family, the UN legal advisor, etc. 3. Psychological and emotional consequences. Constant fear. Insaf lives in fear of being discovered, extradited, or killed. She is aware that even in exile, Sudanese agents or radical students may try to harm her. Isolation. She is cut off from her roots, unable to contact her family, and must hide her identity and faith for safety. Internal conflict. The novel shows Insaf's struggle with her own sense of identity, faith, and belonging. Her conversion is both a liberation and a source of immense danger. 4. Broader societal impact. Instrument of political and religious control. The threat of apostasy charges is used by religious and political authorities to suppress dissent, control women, and enforce conformity. International human rights conflict. The novel highlights the clash between Sudanese Sharia law and international human rights norms. Western countries and the UN are depicted as slow and sometimes ineffective in protecting apostates, but ultimately provide a path to safety for Insaf. 5. Key passages from the novel. Apostasy from Islam is a capital crime in a Muslim country such as Sudan and is considered high treason and hence is punishable by death through hanging. The Prophet Muhammad said, "Whoever changes his religion, kill him." We must return her to Sudan as quickly as possible. When she arrives there, she must be tried before the Sharia court, convicted, and hanged to death for her apostasy from Islam and turning into an impure, infidel Christian woman. The United Nations office in India rejected my wife's refugee application for asylum because its legal advisor was misled by a false report he received from the Sudanese embassy in New Delhi. If my wife is extradited to Sudan, she will not be imprisoned for 14 years for murder, but she will be hanged to death for apostasy. Summary table. Consequence type manifestation in the novel. Legal death penalty, extradition attempts, loss of legal protection. Social ostracism, incitement to violence, loss of family/community. Psychological fear, isolation, identity crisis. Political/religious used to suppress dissent, enforce conformity. International conflict between Sharia and human rights law. In summary, apostasy in The Abominable Love is depicted as the ultimate transgression, carrying the threat of death, total social exclusion, and relentless pursuit by religious and state authorities. The novel uses Insaf's ordeal to critique the brutality of apostasy laws and to highlight the courage required to claim religious freedom in such a context. Here's a clear, detailed answer based on the content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. How Siham cleared Insaf from 3 murders but failed in the 4th. Background. In the novel, Insaf Salah al-Junaid is accused of 4 murders. The murder of her alleged bastard child, Walid Haram. The murder of her first husband, Haj Taha. The murder of her roommate, Badriya Adarub. The murder of the pimp woman, Haja Shada. Her defense lawyer, Siham Khalil, plays a central role in the courtroom drama, attempting to clear Insaf of all charges. 1. Clearing Insaf from the first 3 murders. A. Murder of the bastard child. Siham's defense. Siham proved that Insaf was not the mother of the murdered infant. She presented evidence that another girl, Nadia Ali Hassan, gave birth to the child, who was then killed by a midwife. The real mother died from complications, and the midwife and accomplices were convicted for the crime. Result: the court acquitted Insaf of this charge. B. Murder of Haj Taha, her first husband. Siham's defense. Siham argued that Insaf's marriage to Haj Taha was forced, and that on their wedding night, when he tried to consummate the marriage, Insaf pushed him in self-defense. The old man fell, hit his head, and died accidentally. Siham cited local customs and similar cases where brides were acquitted under such circumstances. Result: the court ruled the death accidental, not premeditated murder, and acquitted Insaf. C. Murder of Badriya Adarub, roommate. Siham's defense. Siham investigated and found that Badriya was killed by her own brother in an honor killing, not by Insaf. She gathered testimony and evidence from Port Sudan and Khartoum, showing that Badriya's brother confessed to the crime. Result: the court acquitted Insaf of this murder as well. 2. Why Siham failed to clear Insaf from the 4th murder, Haja Shada. D. Murder of Haja Shada, the pimp woman. Siham's defense. Siham argued that Insaf killed Haja Shada in self-defense. Haja Shada had kidnapped Insaf, tried to force her into sexual exploitation, and blackmailed her with threats of police exposure. Siham claimed Insaf acted to protect her honor and prevent being trafficked. Prosecution's argument. The prosecution argued that Insaf killed Haja Shada over a dispute about dividing money earned from prostitution. They presented evidence that Insaf had willingly exposed herself to a wealthy Saudi man for money, and that the murder was not self-defense, but a quarrel over illicit gains. Court's reasoning. The court was not convinced by Siham's self-defense argument. They cited Insaf's presence in the pimp's house and her participation in exposing herself for money. The lack of immediate threat to her life at the moment of the murder. The existence of nude photos and the payment check as evidence of her involvement in prostitution. The court concluded the killing was related to a financial dispute, not self-defense. Result: Insaf was convicted of the murder of Haja Shada and sentenced to death, later commuted by presidential pardon. Summary table. Murder charge. Siham's defense. Court's decision. Bastard child not Insaf's child, real culprit found acquitted. Haj Taha, husband, accidental death, self-defense acquitted. Badriya Adarub, roommate, killed by her brother, honor killing, acquitted. Haja Shah the pimp, self-defense claim, but court saw it as a financial dispute, convicted. In summary, Siham succeeded in clearing Insaf from the first 3 murder charges by providing alternative culprits, evidence, and context. However, she failed in the 4th case because the court believed the evidence pointed to a financial motive and not self-defense, leading to Insaf's conviction. Here's a concise summary of the courtroom scenes from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, focusing on the dramatic trial of Insaf Salah al-Junaid. Summary of the courtroom scenes. Setting. The trial takes place in the Khartoum Criminal Court, with large public attendance and high tension. The case is sensational, involving multiple murder charges, accusations of adultery, theft, and prostitution against Insaf. Structure of the trial. The trial is divided into 3 main sessions, each focusing on different charges, followed by a final verdict session. First session. The Gadaref murders. Charges: murder of the bastard child, Walid Haram, and the death of her first husband, Haj Taha. Prosecution argues Insaf committed these crimes out of immorality and rebellion.
Défense, Siam Khalil.
Proves the murdered infant was not Insaf's child, another girl and a midwife were responsible. Argues Haj Taha's death was accidental, Insaf pushed him in self-defense during a forced marriage, and he died from the fall. Outcome: the court acquits Insaf of both charges, accepting Siham's evidence and arguments. Second session. The Port Sudan and Khartoum murders. Charges: murder of her roommate, Badriya Adarub, and theft of jewelry from her fiancé Samir's family. Prosecution claims Insaf killed Badriya and stole valuables. Defense. Siham investigates and shows Badriya was killed by her own brother in an honor killing, not by Insaf. Proves the jewelry was not stolen for profit. Insaf fled with it in panic and did not benefit from it. Outcome: the court acquits Insaf of Badriya's murder and the theft charge. Third session. The murder of Haja Shada, the pimp. Charges: murder of Haja Shada, involvement in prostitution, and exposing herself for money. Prosecution argues Insaf killed Shada over a dispute about money from prostitution and presents evidence of her exposing herself to a Saudi man for payment. Defense. Siham claims Insaf acted in self-defense, as Shada kidnapped and tried to sexually exploit her. Argues Insaf was forced into the situation and did not profit from the crime. Outcome: the court is not convinced by the self-defense argument. The evidence, nude photos, payment, and circumstances leads the court to convict Insaf of the murder, viewing it as a financial dispute, not self-defense. Final verdict session. Verdict: Insaf is acquitted of the first 3 murder charges and theft, but convicted of the murder of Haja Shada and sentenced to death, later commuted by presidential pardon. Public reaction. The verdict causes public outcry, protests, and appeals for clemency. Key features of the courtroom drama. Siham's role. Siham Khalil is a bold, resourceful, and passionate defense lawyer. She investigates, gathers evidence, and challenges both the prosecution and the social prejudices underlying the case. Social commentary. The courtroom scenes highlight issues of racism, sexism, religious law, and the clash between tradition and justice. Emotional impact. The scenes are charged with emotion, public gasps, tears, applause, and moments of silence as evidence is revealed and arguments are made. In summary, the courtroom scenes are the dramatic heart of the novel, showcasing Seeham's legal skill and the social forces arrayed against Insaf. Seeham's arguments clear Insaf of 3 murder charges, but the weight of evidence and prejudice leads to her conviction for the 4th, setting up the novel's final acts of protest, pardon, and escape. Here's a breakdown of the main characters' roles in the trial scenes from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Key characters and their roles in the trial. 1.
Insaaf Salah Al-Junaid.
Role: the defendant/accused. Situation: faces multiple charges for murders, theft, adultery, and prostitution. Portrayal: often silent, emotional, and traumatized. Her fate is at the mercy of the court and her lawyer's defense. 2.
Siam Khalil.
Role: Insaf's defense lawyer. Portrayal: bold, intelligent, and passionate. She investigates, gathers evidence, and challenges both the prosecution and the social/religious prejudices of the court. Actions: presents alternative suspects and evidence for each murder charge. Argues for Insaf's innocence and contextualizes her actions as self-defense or the result of coercion. Faces hostility and sexism from the court and public, but remains steadfast. 3. The prosecutor. Role: represents the state and society's moral outrage. Portrayal: rigid, moralistic, and often invokes religious law and social norms. Actions: argues that Insaf's actions are the result of immorality and rebellion. Pushes for the harshest penalties, including death. 4. The judge and jury. Role: decide Insaf's fate. Portrayal: influenced by both legal evidence and prevailing social/religious attitudes. Actions: listen to both sides, but are often swayed by public opinion and religious arguments. Ultimately acquit Insaf of 3 murder charges, but convict her of the 4th, the murder of Haja Shahada. 5. Witnesses and supporting characters. Key witnesses: midwife, neighbors, and police provide testimony that helps clear Insaf of the first 3 murder charges. Badriya's brother, his confession is crucial in clearing Insaf of Badriya's murder. Other supporting characters. Haj Salah, Insaf's father, his earlier actions and testimony are referenced, especially regarding forced marriage and family honor. Samir, ex-fiancé William, ex-boyfriend Dang, first love. Their relationships with Insaf are discussed as context for her actions and the social backlash she faces. 6. The public. Role: the audience in the courtroom, representing Sudanese society. Portrayal: highly emotional, often reacting with gasps, applause, or outrage. Actions: their reactions influence the mood of the trial and, indirectly, the judge and jury. 7. Haja Shahada, the pimp. Role: the 4th murder victim. Portrayal: her actions as a blackmailer and trafficker are central to Seeham's self-defense argument. Actions: her murder is the only one for which Insaf is convicted, as the court is not convinced by the self-defense claim. Summary table. Character role in trial. Key actions/impact. Insaf defendant accused, emotional, central to all proceedings. Seeham Khalil defense lawyer investigates, argues, challenges prosecution. Prosecutor states lawyer argues for guilt, invokes religion/morality. Judge and jury decision-makers weigh evidence, swayed by society/religion. Witnesses provide testimony, help clear Insaf of 3 murder charges. Haja Shah, the murder victim, her role as pimp central to 4th murder charge. Public audience, society's voice reacts emotionally, influences atmosphere. In summary, The trial is a dramatic clash between Siham's evidence-based defense and the prosecution's reliance on social and religious norms, with the judge and jury caught between legal facts and public pressure. Insaf's fate is shaped by the interplay of these characters, culminating in her partial acquittal and eventual conviction for the murder of Haja Shada. Here is a detailed account of the prosecutor's arguments during the trial scenes in The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Prosecutor's arguments in the trial. General approach. The prosecutor represents the state and the prevailing social and religious norms. His arguments are characterized by moral condemnation of Insaf's actions, frequent references to Islamic law, Sharia, and Sudanese social customs, emphasis on public order, family honor, and the dangers of female rebellion. Specific arguments by charge. 1. Murder of the bastard child. Claim. Insaf committed adultery with an African boy, became pregnant, and gave birth to a bastard child, Walid Haram. Argument. The prosecutor asserts that Insaf and her mother killed the infant to hide the shame and scandal from the community. Evidence. Relies on neighborhood rumors, the discovery of the infant's body, and the social logic that only Insaf could be the mother due to her absence from the wedding and her rumored love affair. 2. Murder of Haj Taha, her husband. Claim. Insaf murdered her elderly husband, Haj Taha, on their wedding night. Argument. The prosecutor frames this as a deliberate act of rebellion and dishonor, suggesting Insaf killed her husband to avoid fulfilling her marital duties and to escape the consequences of her earlier scandal. Evidence points to the circumstances of the marriage, the sudden death, and Insaf's immediate flight as proof of guilt. 3. Murder of Badriya Adarub, roommate. Claim. Insaf killed her roommate, Badriya, during a quarrel over money or jealousy. Argument. The prosecutor claims that Insaf, already involved in prostitution and theft, killed Badriya to cover up her own crimes or out of rivalry. Evidence cites Insaf's presence at the scene, her flight, and the discovery of valuables in her room. 4. Murder of Haja Shada, the pimp. Claim. Insaf murdered Haja Shada, the pimp, after a dispute over money earned from prostitution. Argument. This is the prosecutor's strongest case. He argues that Insaf willingly participated in prostitution, exposed herself to a Saudi client for money, and then killed Shada in a quarrel over dividing the proceeds. Evidence. Presents nude photos, the payment check, and testimony about the events in Shada's house. Emphasizes that Insaf was not under immediate threat and acted out of greed, not self-defense. Rhetorical strategies. Religious appeals. The prosecutor frequently quotes the Quran and Hadith, especially regarding the punishment for adultery and murder. Social order. He warns that leniency would encourage other women to rebel, dishonor their families, and destabilize society. Demonization. Insaf is portrayed as a symbol of moral decay, female rebellion, and the dangers of mixing with inferior races. Public example. He urges the court to make an example of Insaf to deter others. Sample prosecutor's speech, paraphrased from the novel. The crimes of the suspected Muslim girl, Insaf Salah al-Junaid, were not committed in self-defense or under duress. Rather, she disobeyed her parents, ignored our good norms and social customs, rejected the teachings of our beautiful Islamic religion, sought pleasure in forbidden ways, and was greedy to earn haram money. This is what prompted such a young woman in the prime of her life to commit such heinous crimes. The police authority interrogated the accused, and she confessed to her heinous acts. Accordingly, I ask this esteemed court to impose the harshest punishment on the accused for the heinous and reprehensible crimes she committed against her religion, her community, her family, and the 4 innocent victims whom she killed in cold blood. Her punishment will serve as a warning to any woman who tries to break the law and indulge in the pleasures of this fleeting world. Outcome. The prosecutor's arguments are rejected for the first 3 murders due to Siham's evidence and alternative explanations. For the 4th murder, Haja Shahada, the court is persuaded by the prosecutor's framing of the case as a financial dispute and not self-defense, leading to Insaf's conviction. In summary, the prosecutor's arguments are a blend of legal accusation, religious rhetoric, and social condemnation, aiming to portray Insaf as a dangerous example of female rebellion and moral collapse, and to secure the harshest possible punishment as a deterrent. Certainly. Here's a comparison of Siham's counterarguments versus the prosecutor's arguments for each major charge in the trial scenes of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. 1. Murder of the bastard child. Prosecutor's argument. Insaf committed adultery, became pregnant, and killed her illegitimate child to hide the scandal. Siham's counterargument. Presented evidence that the murdered infant was not Insaf's child. Showed that another girl, Nadia Ali Hassan, gave birth to the child who was killed by a midwife. Provided police and witness testimony, and the real culprits were already convicted. Result. Siham's evidence-based approach directly refuted the prosecutor's reliance on rumor and social logic. The court acquitted Insaf. 2. Murder of Haj Taha, her husband. Prosecutor's argument. Insaf deliberately killed her elderly husband to escape her marriage and further dishonor her family. Siham's counterargument. Argued the marriage was forced and that Insaf acted in self-defense when Haj Taha tried to consummate the marriage against her will. Demonstrated that the death was accidental, a fall after being pushed. Cited local customs and similar cases where brides were acquitted under such circumstances. Result. Siham's argument reframed the event as an accident, not murder. The court accepted her reasoning and acquitted Insaf. 3. Murder of Badriya Adarub, roommate. Prosecutor's argument. Claimed Insaf killed Badriya out of jealousy or to cover up other crimes. Siham's counterargument. Investigated and found that Badriya was killed by her own brother in an honor killing. Produced the brother's confession and supporting evidence from Port Sudan and Khartoum. Result. Siham's investigative work provided an alternative perpetrator, leading to Insaf's acquittal. 4. Murder of Haja Shahada, the pimp. Prosecutor's argument. Asserted that Insaf killed Shahada in a dispute over money from prostitution. Presented evidence of Insaf's involvement in exposing herself for money and the existence of nude photos and a payment check. Claimed the murder was not self-defense, but a quarrel over illicit gains. Siham's counterargument. Claimed Insaf was kidnapped, blackmailed, and forced into the situation. Argued that Insaf killed Shahada in self-defense to protect her honor and prevent being trafficked. Emphasized Insaf's lack of intent to profit and her victimization. Result. The court was not convinced by Siham's self-defense argument, given the evidence of financial motive and participation in the events. Insaf was convicted. Comparison table. Charge prosecutor's argument, Siham's counterargument outcome. Murder of bastard child. Insaf killed her illegitimate child, not her child. Real culprits identified, acquitted. Murder of Haj Taha, deliberate murder to escape marriage, accidental death, self-defense, forced marriage, acquitted. Murder of Badriya Adarub, jealousy / cover-up. Insaf killed roommate Badriya, killed by her brother, honor killing, acquitted. Murder of Haja Shahada, killed over money from prostitution, not defense, self-defense from blackmail / trafficking, convicted. Summary of Siham's strategy. Evidence-based. Siham relies on investigation, alternative suspects, and documented facts. Contextual. She contextualizes Insaf's actions as self-defense or the result of coercion and social injustice. Challenging prejudice. Siham confronts the court's and society's biases, especially regarding gender, race, and class. Limitations. Where hard evidence, e.g., financial transactions, nude photos, supports the prosecution, and where the court is swayed by social prejudice, Siham's arguments are less effective. In summary, Siham's counterarguments are most successful when she can provide clear alternative explanations and evidence. She is less successful when the prosecution's evidence is material and when the court is influenced by social and religious prejudice. Certainly. Here's an analysis of Siham Khalil as a feminist lawyer in the context of the courtroom scenes from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed. Siham Khalil as a feminist lawyer. Analysis. 1. Challenging patriarchal and religious authority. Siham stands almost alone against a courtroom dominated by men, religious authorities, and social norms that are deeply patriarchal. She questions the legitimacy of forced marriage, the right of fathers to control daughters, and the use of religious law to justify violence against women. By defending Insaf, Siham directly confronts the system that criminalizes female sexuality, autonomy, and resistance. 2. Evidence-based, rational advocacy. Siham's approach is grounded in investigation, facts, and logic, not rumor or social prejudice. She exposes the unreliability of accusations based on gossip, honor, or reputation, which are often used to control and punish women. Her legal strategy centers the truth of women's lived experiences, forced marriage, abuse, blackmail, and the impossibility of justice in a biased system. 3. Giving voice to the silenced. Insaf is often voiceless, traumatized, and unable to defend herself. Siham becomes her voice, articulating her suffering and humanity to a hostile audience. She insists on Insaf's right to be heard and believed, even when the court and public are eager to condemn her. 4. Exposing double standards and hypocrisy. Siham calls out the hypocrisy of a society that punishes women for honor while excusing or ignoring male violence and sexual exploitation. She highlights the racial and class prejudices that intersect with gender oppression, especially in the treatment of Insaf's relationships with African men. 5. Personal risk and social backlash. Siham faces hostility, sexism, and even threats for her advocacy. She is criticized for her appearance, her boldness, and her willingness to challenge religious and social authorities. Her actions inspire both admiration and outrage, showing the risks faced by women who challenge the status quo. 6. Limitations and systemic barriers. Despite her brilliance and courage, Siham is ultimately limited by the system. The court is swayed by material evidence and social prejudice, not just truth or justice. Her defeat in the fourth murder charge, Haja Shada, demonstrates the limits of feminist advocacy in a deeply patriarchal and religious legal system. Feminist themes embodied by Siham. Women's autonomy. Siham fights for Insaf's right to choose her own life, love, and body. Solidarity. She models female solidarity in a world where women are often isolated and blamed. Resistance. Siham's presence and arguments are acts of resistance against a system designed to silence and punish women. Intersectionality. She recognizes how gender, race, class, and religion combine to oppress women like Insaf. Representative moments. Siham's public speeches in court, where she denounces the use of Sharia to justify violence against women. Her investigative work, traveling, interviewing witnesses, and reconstructing events to clear Insaf. Her emotional appeals to the judge and jury, urging them to see Insaf as a human being, not a symbol of shame. Summary table. Feminist aspect: how Siham embodies it. Challenging patriarchy confronts male/religious authority, defends autonomy. Centering women's truth investigates, gives voice to Insaf's experience. Exposing hypocrisy calls out double standards, racial/class bias. Facing backlash endures sexism, threats, and professional risk. Systemic limits ultimately constrained by patriarchal legal system. In summary, Siham Khalil is portrayed as a feminist lawyer who uses her intellect, courage, and compassion to fight for women's rights and justice in a hostile environment. She exposes the injustices of patriarchal, religious, and racist systems, even as she is ultimately limited by them. Her role is both heroic and tragic, a symbol of resistance and the ongoing struggle for women's liberation. Here are examples of Siham Khalil's courtroom speeches from The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, based on the actual text of the novel. These passages illustrate her style, courage, and feminist advocacy during the trial. 1. Siham's opening speech, first session. Your Honor, the judge, and the distinguished jurymen. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Deng Nasser appointed me to defend the case of the accused, Insaf Salah Al-Junaid. I admit that when Mr. Deng first contacted me, I was reluctant to plead this case. Deng is the same African boy accused of falling in love, committing adultery, and illegally fathering a forbidden bastard child, or the so-called Walid Haram with my client, the Arab girl Insaf. He told me that he had not had any inappropriate sexual contact with Insaf. He admitted that one day he saw her on her way to the all-girls high school, which was near to his all-boys high school, and he admired her beauty and fell in love with her. Over time, Insaf responded to his emotions. She then proceeds to recount the facts of Insaf's life, challenging the prosecution's narrative and exposing the role of racism and patriarchy in the accusations. 2. Siham's defense on the murder of Haj Taha. As I mentioned earlier, and I would like to repeat it again, the groom, Haj Taha, was 77 years old, and the bride, Insaf, was 17 years old. The accused told me that at that time she was just a virgin teenage girl who had never married and had never known a man before. I have 7 cases of brides who pushed, hit, or kicked their grooms on the first nights of their weddings and caused their untimely deaths, but none of them had been charged with first-degree murder or crime. There are many situations where wives quarreled on their wedding nights with their husbands and caused their deaths. This was first because of custom and secondly, because their husbands were old enough to be their fathers or grandfathers. Therefore, the wife, Insaf, did not intentionally kill her husband, Haj Taha. She said that she pushed him when he tried to consummate his marriage to her against her wishes. Her push caused the old man to fall on his back, fracturing his fragile skull and dying inside her confinement room. Therefore, his death was accidental and not the result of premeditation and deliberation. 3. Siham's emotional appeal, third session, Haja Shatha's murder. If my defendant, Insaf, had been accustomed to wearing such a scandalous and indecent dress that the Women's Prison Administration forced her to wear in the last session today, she would not have received shelter from Haj Abdullah's family. This type of clothing is intended for bad women and prostitutes, but not for a girl with good morals like Insaf. Today, I will expose people who hide their evil motives under the cloak of religion and the umbrella of law. Today, I'm going to drop a bomb in this court, and I don't care who gets hurt. Today, I will prove to the court that the church pastor who accused Insaf of theft is himself a thief, and the police officer who accused Insaf of adultery is an adulterer himself. 4. Siham's closing speech, third session. This noble Arab girl is a symbol of purity, honor, chastity, and courage. Just as her name means, Insaf, she is an angel and messenger of heavenly justice and should be called Adla and Afaf, just and chaste. She chose to eat a rotten morsel of food from a filthy garbage container rather than sell her body into prostitution. She preferred to kill rather than allow people to satisfy their greed for money and their insatiable desires with her pure body. She is more honorable than her Arab father, who shaved her hair, locked her in her room for 6 months, assaulted and physically abused her with a stick, and finally sold her to an old man to preserve his honor. This accused girl challenged our prejudice against other Sudanese. She does not see our African sisters and brothers as we see them. The Arab girl, Insaf, did not see her African lover, Deng, as inferior to her as her racist parents saw him. When she met him in her city, she fell in love with him. She wanted to marry him and spend the rest of her life with him as husband and wife. Unfortunately, her prejudiced Arab parents hated her and punished her harshly for falling in love with the so-called black-faced African Negro slave. To this day, the girl Insaf loves the boy Deng, and the African boy loves his Arab girlfriend. Accordingly, I ask you and the members of the jury to acquit the innocent defendant, Insaf Salah Al-Junaid, of the false charges that were written against her. Thank you, Your Honor, the judge, the honorable jurymen, and ladies and gentlemen. 5. Siham's protest after the death sentence. Your final verdict is a terrible crime in itself. God will never forgive the court for convicting such an innocent girl. You have condemned every woman in Sudan. You have given men the right to enslave and abuse women in this country forever. These speeches show Siham's use of evidence and precedent to challenge the prosecution, emotional and moral appeals to the judge and jury, direct confrontation with religious and patriarchal authority, defense of women's dignity, autonomy, and humanity in the face of social and legal oppression. Here's a focused analysis of Siham Khalil's cross-examinations in the courtroom scenes of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, based on the actual text. Siham's cross-examination style and examples. 1. Evidence-based questioning. Siham's cross-examinations are methodical and fact-driven. She interrogates witnesses and challenges the prosecution's narrative by demanding specific details rather than accepting rumors or assumptions, forcing witnesses to clarify who saw what, when, and how, highlighting contradictions in testimonies, especially those based on hearsay or social prejudice. Example: when the prosecution claims Insaf killed her bastard child, Siham brings in police and medical records and cross-examines the midwife and neighbors, exposing that another girl was the mother and the midwife was the killer. 2. Exposing motives and bias. Siham often asks witnesses about their personal motives or biases, especially when their testimony is colored by racism, sexism, or family honor. Example: she questions Badria's brother, the real killer, about his relationship with his sister, his feelings about her, shame, and his presence at the scene, leading to his confession of an honor killing. 3. Challenging authority figures. Siham is not afraid to cross-examine police officers, religious leaders, or even the judge, especially when their actions are based on custom rather than law. Example: she questions the police officer Yasser Talha about the supposed anonymous tip that led him to the murder scene of Haja Shada, exposing the lack of a recorded call and the improbability of the official story. 4. Using precedent and custom. Siham brings up legal precedents and local customs to challenge the prosecution's interpretation of events. Example: in the case of Haj Taha's death, she cross-examines witnesses about local marriage customs, showing that it is not unusual for a bride to resist on her wedding night, and that accidental deaths have occurred before without murder charges. 5. Humanizing the accused. Through cross-examination, Siham draws out the humanity and suffering of Insaf, forcing witnesses to acknowledge her trauma and the abuse she suffered. Example: she asks family members and neighbors about Insaf's treatment at home, her forced circumcision, and her isolation, making the jury and public see her as a victim rather than a villain. Representative cross-examination moments, paraphrased/condensed. To the midwife. Did you, or did you not, assist in the delivery of a child for Nadia Ali Hassan on the night in question? Who else was present? What happened to the child? Did you see Insaf Salah al-Junaid at any point that night? To Badria's brother. You claim you came to Khartoum to visit your sister. Why did you go to her apartment late at night? Did you have a weapon with you? What was your relationship with your sister before she left Port Sudan? Did you ever threaten her? To the police officer. Officer Yasser, you say you received an anonymous call. Where is the recording? Who else was on duty? Why did you go alone to the scene? Did you know Haja Shada personally? To the neighbors. You say you saw a girl running from the house. Did you see her face? Did you see her carrying anything? Did you see anyone else leave the house? Siham's cross-examination impact. Discredits unreliable witnesses and exposes the role of rumor and prejudice. Forces confessions or contradictions that undermine the prosecution. Shifts the narrative from Insaf as a criminal to Insaf as a victim of circumstance and social injustice. In summary, Siham's cross-examinations are a blend of legal rigor, social critique, and empathy. She uses them to dismantle the prosecution's case, reveal the truth, and advocate for justice in a system stacked against women. Based on the actual text of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, here is how Siham Khalil confronts the Minister of Religious Affairs, Mrs. Holy, and Pastor David during the courtroom drama. 1. Confronting the Minister of Religious Affairs. During the third session of the trial, the Minister of Religious Affairs interrupts the proceedings, demanding that Siham be excluded and punished for her boldness and for exposing her body, when she removes her sari top to cover Insaf's immodest dress. The judge rebukes the minister, but Siham herself directly challenges his authority. Siham to the minister in open court. If my defendant, Insaf, had been accustomed to wearing such a scandalous and indecent dress that the Women's Prison Administration forced her to wear in the last session today, she would not have received shelter from Haj Abdullah's family. This type of clothing is intended for bad women and prostitutes, but not for a girl with good morals like Insaf. She then locks eyes with the minister and continues. Today I will expose people who hide their evil motives under the cloak of religion and the umbrella of law. Today I'm going to drop a bomb in this court, and I don't care who gets hurt. The minister, unable to respond, turns his face away to avoid her gaze. 2. Confronting Mrs. Holy. Siham exposes Mrs. Holy's hypocrisy and false claims of spiritual discernment. When Mrs. Holy claims to have received divine revelation about Insaf's crimes, Siham challenges her directly in court. Siham to the court, referencing Mrs. Holy. Mrs. Holy claimed that God revealed to her the secret information that had been hidden from them by Insaf through the Holy Spirit. Moreover, she said that God gifted her to know the crimes committed by evil men and to discern the sins committed by bad women such as adultery, theft, murder, and the like. When she made such a strange claim, I challenged her to tell me Ilham's real name before she fled from her family in the city of Gadaref, but she could not. She's sitting here in court. Let Mrs. Holy, the prophetess and fortune-teller, come forward and tell the judge the name of one of those sitting to her left or to her right. This public challenge exposes Mrs. Holy's lack of real knowledge and undermines her authority in front of the court and audience. 3. Confronting Pastor David. Siham also calls out Pastor David's duplicity and the role he played in spreading rumors and endangering Insaf. Siham to the court, referencing Pastor David. The Coptic church pastor sitting there is a false clergyman. He lied to Insaf, he lied to the police, and he lied to his church. Insaf was deceived by him when he claimed that he discovered her involvement in the murder of her friend Badria through an article he read in a newspaper. Now let him come forward and tell the court how he knew that Ashraka and Ilham were the names of the same girl whom we know as Insaf. I have here in my file a copy of the newspaper that announced the killing of Badria Adarub and mentioned her roommate Ashraka as the main accused. The newspaper did not include a photo of the fugitive accused, Ashraka. She then invites Pastor David to explain his knowledge, but he remains silent and angry, refusing to meet her challenge. Summary of Siham's confrontational style. Directly challenges religious and social authority figures in open court. Exposes hypocrisy and lack of evidence behind their accusations. Uses public challenge and logic to undermine their credibility. Defends her client's dignity and the principle of justice over religious or social prejudice. Context. Mrs. Holy is a Pentecostal Christian prophetess who claims to have spiritual gifts and divine revelation. She accuses Insaf, under the alias Ilham, of being possessed by evil spirits and of having committed murder and other sins. Siham, as Insaf's lawyer, later confronts Mrs. Holy's credibility and exposes her in open court. Key dialogue and confrontation. At Mrs. Holy's house. Mrs. Holy attempts to exorcise Insaf, believing she is possessed. Mrs. Holy, you are a killing evil spirit, get out of her. I command you in the name of Jesus to reveal your name. How many of you are inside? What is the name of the other spirit? You two evil spirits of Ilham and Badria, I command you in the name of Jesus to leave this body and never return. Insaf, terrified and confused, tries to explain. Insaf, Auntie, I am not a murderer. My name is Ilham Sola Al-Junaid. We were two of us. Her name is Badria Adarub, but I did not kill her. I went to see her in her room. Mrs. Holy, convinced of her own spiritual authority, refuses to listen. Mrs. Holy, this Muslim woman has an extremely strong, deceitful, evil spirit. She must not stay in my holy house. She could kill you first, my daughter Clementina, and then murder me, your mother Esther, after you, if she spent one night here. Clementina, her daughter, tries to reason.
Clementina?
Please, Mom, calm down and listen to her sad story. She's an incredibly good girl. Mom, this Muslim girl has neither money nor shelter. How can you send a young teenage girl like this out into the streets at night? But Mrs. Holy is unmoved. Mrs. Holy, I cannot give Satan a foothold in my holy abode. She has to go back to where she came from. In the courtroom, Siham's confrontation. Later, Siham exposes Mrs. Holy's lack of credibility in front of the judge and public. Siham to the court. Mrs. Holy claimed that God revealed to her the secret information that had been hidden from them by Insaf through the Holy Spirit. Moreover, she said that God gifted her to know the crimes committed by evil men and to discern the sins committed by bad women such as adultery, theft, murder, and the like. When she made such a strange claim, I challenged her to tell me Ilham's real name before she fled from her family in the city of Gadaref, but she could not. She's sitting here in court. Let Mrs. Holy, the prophetess and fortune-teller, come forward and tell the judge the name of one of those sitting to her left or to her right. Result: Mrs. Holy is unable to answer, and her authority is publicly undermined. The audience applauds Siham's challenge. Summary of Siham's approach. Directly challenges Mrs. Holy's supposed spiritual gifts and revelations. Demands concrete evidence, not mystical claims. Exposes Mrs. Holy's inability to provide real facts, showing her as a fraud. Wins public support and undermines the religious and social authority that condemned Insaf. In The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed, Siham Khalil, as Insaf's defense lawyer, repeatedly refers to the fact that Hajj Abdullah found Insaf eating from a garbage container for several important reasons during the trial. 1. To humanize Insaf and show her innocence. Siham uses this detail to counter the prosecution's portrayal of Insaf as a greedy, immoral, or calculating criminal. By reminding the court and public that Insaf was found starving, homeless, and eating from a garbage container with stray dogs, Siham paints a picture of a desperate, vulnerable young woman, not a scheming murderer or prostitute. Siham's words in court. I saw the noble Arab girl Insaf bent in a garbage container with 2 stray dogs, looking for something to eat. I wept when I saw a noble Arab Muslim girl standing inside a smelly trash can and looking for something to eat. Therefore, I took her to my house and asked my wife, Haja Maryam, to feed her and give her water to drink. 2. To refute the motive of greed or profit. Siham argues that if Insaf were truly motivated by money or criminal intent, she would not have been found in such a state of destitution. This undermines the prosecution's claim that Insaf killed for money or was living off the proceeds of crime.
Siam est logique.
If Insaf had broken into the pastor's office and stolen the church's money from his safe, she would not have searched for a piece of moldy bread and rotten fruit in the trash container. She was not going to spend her first night in a dirty public women's washroom. She would not have slept during her second night in a hole under the Omdurman Bridge. 3. To expose social and legal injustice. By highlighting Insaf's extreme poverty and abandonment, Siham exposes the failures of both family and society. She shows that Insaf is a victim of social prejudice, gender violence, and systemic injustice, not a perpetrator. 4. To appeal to the jury's and public sympathy. This image is powerful and emotional. Siham uses it to move the hearts of the judge, jury, and audience, making them see Insaf as a suffering human being deserving of compassion, not just a defendant. 5. To undermine the credibility of her accusers. By showing that Insaf was so desperate she had to eat from the garbage, Siham casts doubt on the accusations of those who claim she was living a life of luxury or criminal profit. Summary. Siham refers to Haj Abdullah finding Insaf eating from a garbage container to humanize Insaf and show her innocence and desperation. Refute claims that she was motivated by greed or criminal intent. Expose the injustice and abandonment she suffered. Appeal to the courts and public sympathy. Undermine the credibility of her accusers. This detail is a central part of Siham's strategy to shift the narrative from Insaf as a criminal to Insaf as a victim of circumstance and social cruelty. How Dang learns about Insaf's arrest. After Insaf flees Sudan and is later arrested in India on false drug charges, Dang is left behind in Sudan, believing he may never see her again. Dang's cousin, Christina, who is studying in Bombay, is the first to meet Insaf when she arrives in India. Christina becomes aware that Insaf has arrived alone and is in distress, but Dang himself is not immediately present. Dang learns about Insaf's arrest through communication with his cousin Christina. After Insaf's arrest during the police raid in Bombay, Christina and other Sudanese students become aware of the situation. The news of the mass arrest of Sudanese students, including Insaf, spreads quickly among the Sudanese student community in India and is discussed widely. Eventually, Dang is informed by Christina and other contacts about Insaf's situation. Later, Dang receives more direct news about Insaf's imprisonment and legal troubles through letters and messages sent by friends and intermediaries. He is deeply affected by the news and tries to help her from afar, including selling his car to pay for legal fees and contacting lawyers to defend her. In summary, Dang learns about Insaf's arrest through his cousin Christina and the Sudanese student network in India. He is kept updated through letters, messages, and word of mouth from friends and relatives. This news motivates him to take action, seek legal help, and ultimately fight for her release and safety. Dang hears about Insaf's arrest in Khartoum. After Insaf is arrested in Khartoum, the news of her arrest and the charges against her quickly spreads throughout the city and the country. The case becomes a public scandal, widely discussed in the media and among the Sudanese people. Newspapers publish her photo and details about the accusations, which include murder, theft, and other serious crimes. Dang learns about Insaf's arrest primarily through the following ways. Media coverage. The newspapers and radio in Sudan report extensively on Insaf's arrest, her trial, and the sensational charges against her. Her case becomes infamous and her name and photo are published in the press. Dang, like many others, reads about her situation in the newspapers. Word of mouth. The news is also spread by word of mouth among the Sudanese community, especially among those who knew Insaf or Dang from their school days in Gadaref. Friends, relatives, and acquaintances discuss the case, and Dang hears about it through these social channels. Personal motivation. Upon learning about Insaf's arrest and the gravity of the accusations, Dang is deeply affected. He feels responsible for her suffering, as their forbidden love was the root cause of her troubles. This motivates him to take action, seek legal help, and ultimately fight for her defense. Direct involvement. Dang's involvement becomes more direct when he decides to hire a lawyer, Siham Khalil, to defend Insaf. He meets with the lawyer, discusses the case, and becomes actively engaged in trying to help her, even selling his car to pay for legal fees. Key passage, paraphrased. Dang first learns about Insaf's arrest and the charges against her when he reads about her case in the local newspapers. The reports shock him, and he realizes that the accusations are false and exaggerated. He is determined to prove her innocence and support her, despite the risks and the opposition from his own family. In summary, Dang hears about Insaf's arrest in Khartoum through widespread media coverage and community gossip, which compels him to become personally involved in her legal defense. Here's a focused answer based on the content of The Abominable Love by Dr. A. Ahmed regarding how Susie, Dang's fiancée, reacts when Dang hears about Insaf's arrest through her. How Susie reacts when Dang hears about Insaf's arrest through her. Susie is the one who first brings the news of Insaf's arrest to Dang. She reads about the scandalous case in the newspaper while they are together at a restaurant. At first, Susie is simply sharing shocking news, not realizing Deng's deep connection to Insaf. Susie's reactions unfold as follows. Shock and gossip. Susie is surprised and disturbed by the details in the newspaper, which describe Insaf as a criminal involved in murder, theft, and prostitution. She discusses the case with Deng as a piece of sensational news. Jealousy and hurt. When Deng reacts emotionally, showing distress, disbelief, and personal concern, Susie is taken aback. She quickly realizes that Deng knows Insaf personally and still cares about her. This realization makes Susie jealous and insecure about her own relationship with Deng. Argument and accusation. Susie becomes upset and confrontational. She accuses Deng of still loving Insaf and questions his loyalty. She is frustrated and angry that Deng wants to get involved in defending Insaf, especially since they are engaged. Disapproval and ultimatum. Susie strongly disapproves of Deng's determination to help Insaf. She warns him that his family will not support him and that he is risking everything for a girl now accused of terrible crimes. She tries to persuade him to abandon the idea, but Deng refuses. Emotional distance and breakup. The argument escalates and Susie's parents are eventually called in. The engagement is broken off because Deng insists on defending Insaf, showing that his loyalty to Insaf outweighs his commitment to Susie. Key passage, paraphrased from the novel. Susie is initially shocked by the news and shares it with Deng. When Deng reacts with deep emotion and insists on Insaf's innocence, Susie becomes jealous and angry. She argues with Deng, accuses him of still loving Insaf, and ultimately cannot accept his decision to help her. This leads to the end of their engagement. In summary, Susie's reaction moves from shock and gossip to jealousy, anger, and heartbreak as she realizes Deng's loyalty to Insaf is stronger than his commitment to her. This confrontation marks the end of their relationship. Deng's response to Susie. When Susie tells Deng about Insaf's arrest and the scandalous accusations against her, as reported in the newspapers, Deng's response is immediate, emotional, and deeply personal. Shock and disbelief. Deng is visibly shocked and cannot believe the accusations against Insaf. He insists that the charges are false and that Insaf is innocent. Personal connection. Deng reveals to Susie that he knows Insaf personally and that she was once very dear to him. He admits that he still cares about her and cannot accept the idea that she is guilty of the crimes described. Defensive and determined. Deng becomes defensive when Susie questions his loyalty and his feelings for Insaf. He passionately defends Insaf's character and insists that she is a victim of circumstance and injustice. Sense of responsibility. Deng feels responsible for Insaf's suffering, believing that their forbidden love was the root cause of her troubles. He tells Susie that he must help Insaf, no matter the cost. Unwillingness to abandon Insaf. Despite Susie's anger, jealousy, and pleas for him to let go, Deng refuses to abandon Insaf. He is willing to risk his relationship with Susie, his family's support, and even his own future to defend Insaf and prove her innocence. Emotional honesty. Deng is honest with Susie about his feelings. He admits that his love for Insaf never truly died, even though he is engaged to Susie. He cannot ignore Insaf's plight and feels compelled to act. Key paraphrased dialogue. Deng tells Susie, "I know Insaf. She is not capable of these crimes. If she is suffering, it is because of me and our love. I cannot let her face this alone. I must help her, even if it means losing everything else." When Susie accuses him of still loving Insaf, Deng does not deny it. Instead, he insists that helping Insaf is the right thing to do, regardless of the consequences for his engagement or family. In summary, Deng's response to Susie is one of unwavering loyalty to Insaf, a sense of personal responsibility, and a willingness to sacrifice his own happiness and relationships to help her. He refuses to abandon Insaf, even when pressured by Susie and his family. Insaf in Khartoum. After Insaf is arrested in Khartoum and faces a series of serious accusations, including murder, theft, and other crimes, Deng becomes aware of her plight through media reports and word of mouth. Despite the risks and the disapproval of his own family and fiancé, Deng is determined to help her. Here's how Deng helps Insaf. Moral support and loyalty. Deng refuses to believe the accusations against Insaf. He is convinced of her innocence and feels a deep sense of responsibility for her suffering, as their forbidden love was the root cause of her troubles. Hiring a lawyer. Deng takes concrete action by hiring a skilled lawyer, Siham Khalil, to defend Insaf in court. He meets with the lawyer, explains the background of the case, and provides all the information he can to support Insaf's defense. Financial sacrifice. To pay for Insaf's legal defense, Deng sells his car and uses the money to cover the lawyer's fees and other expenses related to the trial. Active involvement in the case. Deng works closely with the lawyer, accompanies her to different cities, such as Gadaref and Port Sudan, to gather evidence and helps investigate the circumstances of the accusations against Insaf. Emotional support. Deng visits Insaf in jail, encourages her to stay strong, and reassures her that she is not alone. His presence and unwavering support give Insaf hope during her darkest moments. Public advocacy. Deng's commitment to Insaf's case draws public attention and sympathy. His willingness to stand by her, even at great personal cost, challenges the prejudices and social barriers of their community. In summary, Deng helps Insaf in Khartoum by providing emotional and moral support, hiring and funding a lawyer for her defense, actively participating in the investigation, and standing by her side despite social and familial opposition.